Okay, what were you saying there?
I said during our break, I pulled I pulled my copy
Okay.
of the Grove Press issue of the Review of Contemporary Fiction, but it was right next to but it was right next to the William Burroughs issue.
All right. Did
So
you?
this is 1984. So this is really early. But you look, it's got another iconoclastic picture because you've got Burroughs, who never looked like a beat writer. He always looked like he was the heir to the Burroughs adding machine company. But here he's packing a pistol, and he was always pro-gun, so a lot of traditional leftist values, Burroughs didn't adhere to. But this is 94. And if you look inside, it's still a typed manuscript. It's only by the time he gets to the Grove Press issue that he begins to typeset these.
Well,
John,
so it's 84. You mean 84? Not
no, yeah, 84.
yeah. Yeah. So Beckett. I mean, you've done 5 books or maybe more about Beckett, and then you did this book recently, Burroughs Unbound. It came out about 2 years ago. I think since the last time I talked to you, it's come out.
Right.
And so Burroughs is like the second biggest writer on Grove Press in the Barney years. Can you talk about how you decided to write about him and how the reception of how that book went?
Sure. The in fact, Burroughs was as much a part of my teenage years as Beckett was, since I was, collecting Grove Press material at least since Tropic of Cancer came out. I still remember picking up Tropic of Cancer and thinking, this is what literature can be? My goodness. So I was drawn to these outlier writers, and Burroughs was right in that category. I made different kinds of connections with Beckett, so I developed that strain of my interest through theater, mostly. But when I showed you this Burroughs issue of the Review of Contemporary Fiction, there's a faculty member from Florida State University named Francois Boucher, who was great friends with Burroughs. And he tried to get Burroughs to move to North Florida, where he was building an artist colony outside of Tallahassee in a little town called Lloyd. In 1978, he invited Burroughs here right before Burroughs's reputation exploded with the Nova Convention in New York. And Boucher tried very much to get Burroughs on the faculty one way or another of Florida State University. That was a very real possibility. And he also tried to get the university to buy what was the largest collection of Burroughs material in the world, what's called the Vaduz archive, which the New York Public Library finally bought. I think the Florida State Library was afraid of Burroughs.
Right.
They could have bought that massive collection for about $60,000. I think the New York Public Library spent about $6 million.
Wow.
So what Burroughs did is that he bought some property in Lloyd, Florida, thinking that he would build some kind of house, hut, something there. And he was short of cash, so he paid for that property with manuscripts. So as it turns out, Florida State lost for a while, this pile of Burroughs manuscripts. I was on the trail of that for over a decade, and finally ran it down and got the people to donate it to Florida State University. And so we have this substantial collection of Burroughs material. It's not the big stuff that finally went to the New York Public Library, but it's a lot of interesting stuff, including his screenplays for any number of work. So that stuff's been sitting around at Florida State University for another decade. And so at one point I thought, we've got to generate some interest in Burroughs research here among graduate students and and this archive that we have. So that's the sort of long background to why I plunged into Burroughs. And I started with an anthology, but I'm currently writing a full book on Burroughs, so that the anthology led to the full book.
Okay, so the proximity of Burroughs material being in Florida, that kind of that called for some kind of activity on your part.
Yeah.
You're sort of, are you done with Beckett? Have you finished the Beckett?
No, I've got a new book. I've got a new book coming out in a couple of weeks from Cambridge.
But okay, so back to the beginning. I mean, I was talking about Robert Hughes, but and then you taught at the only book you had, the On Beckett book, which was, I think, Grove Press published in 87.
Yeah.
That was the only book I knew that I had read by you when I met you. And then, but at the same time, you had been going. You went to you did a couple things at Magic Theater back in the late '80s, and then you'd already done Ohio Impromptu, and then we did that the first interview, the What Where TV program, and so has there been much directorial stuff that you're doing, like in the past years?
I was making a series of films in Poland.
Oh yeah,
when the pandemic hit. So a couple of those are available. They're on YouTube. I did my own version of But the Clouds, which a play or scenario Beckett wrote for television. Then I put together a lot of Beckett's works on unhappy relationships, which mostly focuses on Krapp's Last Tape, but it's a longer film. The But the Clouds is about a 10-minute film. The next film was called Beckett on the Baltic, based on a line from Krapp's Last Tape when he thinks about having read Effie Briest and his former girlfriend, and he says, I could have been happy with her up there on the Baltic. So we did a film on the Baltic, and that's on eBay as well. It's sort of a compilation of poems and stories and the like, all set against the background of the Baltic, right outside of Gdansk, Poland.
Right.
But I'd planned to do other films, but then all that got shut down with the pandemic. I may get back. I wanted to do some more of sort of recasting or redoing the television plays, which are interesting, but they're done with 1970s technology. So I had an opportunity to do some more interesting things with 21st century technology. Well, so that led to those two films.
There was the one Beckett biography film, I think that came out around 87 or 88, or you think that somebody would do like a big overview, like like they do on BBC all the time, where some writer or artist, and they do like somebody, like a musician, maybe like David Bowie, and they do like I mean, I saw there was a Beckett film at the LA Film Festival many years ago. Maybe 87, maybe
Yeah.
that's probably it's probably
Silence to Silence.
yeah, that one. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there have been several of those. John O'Reilly, who worked with me on my Magic Theater productions, did one called "Waiting for Beckett."
Okay.
They all strike me as being rather unimaginative.
Yeah.
They're films that their directors or producers were afraid to take risks. As I said earlier in this interview, risk is a big part of my incentive.
So if I haven't mentioned it before, like yeah, I'll put some links in the thing. I mean, if you want to check out some Stanley Gontarski's books, I mean, you can go to Amazon or you can go to his page at the Florida State University, and I'll put those links and
Yeah, put the film links on too.
yeah, there's a film link. Where's that?
Yeah, that is to the But the Clouds. That's on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
And Beckett on the Baltic.
Yeah, we'll see some of that. And but I mean, I'm not ending yet because we still got a couple more books. So there's quite a number of books in translation. I mean, we got like some Italian. What's this? Oh, Brazilian. What language is that in?
Yeah, Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Yeah, there's another volume of that coming out. There's a volume coming out from Poland. Another volume coming out from Poland on called the Beckett Handbook. But I mean, this is a measure of Beckett's global reach. All these people want to do things, and the Italians have been jumping into this really big time. They translated all the theatrical notebooks of Samuel Beckett.
Is that a new thing? The Italians kind of caught on like in the last 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, they've always had an interest, but this is a big dedicated push, especially with a lot of plays that have not been done much, particularly the shorter works have not been done much in Italy.
Yeah, there's I have the other book where Grove did Beckett short plays years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the Beckett, the Bergson, the Burroughs, and then you kind of went off the B's and you went for Tennessee Williams, which seems like kind of an oddball modern t-shirt modernism. Where how did you get involved in that? I think we talked about it a little bit, but talk about that.
There's a chapter in that book called Becoming Beckett. And I think there is a point in Tennessee Williams where the expectation of writing another Streetcar Named Desire or Cat in the Hot Tin Roof and the like pretty much bored him. And he discovered that a lot of the more interesting writers were doing very different kind of things. So what got me into Tennessee Williams is not so much Streetcar Named Desire, although I've done a book on that and there's a big chapter on that, but it's that Marlon Brando image that I'm calling t-shirt modernism. This is 5 years after the war or so, before that, 4 years after the end of the Second World War. But my real interest was in the Beckett-like plays that he was doing later in life, which are still underappreciated. The play about Zelda Fitzgerald and her incarceration, called Clothes for a Summer Hotel. All these things are Williams trying to break out of the Tennessee Williams mode. And as it turns out, the Italians were very good at picking up these lesser known works. So part of the reason that book is translated into Italian very quickly is that there's a substantial portion of it about Italian productions of Tennessee Williams, where I claim he's more celebrated than he is in the United States.
Right. So, well, how do you rate some of the other fellow travelers? I mean, there's a theater by Jean Genet, Edward Albee, Ionesco. We met Ionesco in L.A. maybe
Yeah, yeah,
87.
yeah.
Right
I was there.
And he, I mean, your view on him then was he was a little bit kind of out to lunch at that time or something, or just he was very delusional, I think.
Well, he won. I met him several times in Paris, and one of the things he kept repeating is that he couldn't understand why Beckett's popularity was rising so quickly, and his own was sort of stagnant. And so he wanted me to direct some of his later autobiographical works. But I mean, I've gotten a lot of things done, but my whole career is littered with things I never quite got to do. We had planned to do a joint project with Ferlinghetti. I had planned to do several projects with Ionesco. I tried to get Edward Albee to write Tallahassee Impromptu, which would be sort of shown all the time, parallel with Ohio Impromptu. But there are a lot of those projects that just never got done.
Well, do you think Genet's theater is any good? I mean, I mean, I read a book recently. I went back and read a lot of the books I read when I was a teenager, like Our Lady of the Flowers.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense to me at all. I just thought it was just kind of overrated. Maybe some of his maybe I should go back to the Thieves Journal or Funeral Rites or something.
Well, I would suggest you go back to the plays.
Okay.
Those are the ones that when he gets some attention, they tend to be in revivals of his plays.
Okay. Yeah, because
I think.
Yeah, I saw the.
I think they're worth going over.
Okay.
The screens is incredibly innovative.
Okay. And hey, I wanted to ask you. I think you told me another story that when one of the times when you were in San Francisco and directing stuff at the Magic Theater, you had a meeting with Jerry Garcia. Was that true? Or
yeah.
And
yeah,
it
it was.
What happened? What was that about?
Well, I mean, part of what I was interested in is that he had his roots. That is, when he was a young high school guy, it was the Beat generation of writers that he was most interested in. And so I was as much interested in that part of his life. And I've got a new essay coming out on Dylan, and it's the same tack on Dylan. I'm most interested in the possibility that Dylan might be a beat poet, or that Jerry Garcia might be a beat poet. They all had these attractions to that whole generation of people. They went off in different directions, but I think there's a kind of beat spirit in Garcia. And, Dylan backed off a little bit when he started making Frank Sinatra albums.
Yeah.
But, that beat spirit, that on the road, that the Deadheads come right out of Kerouac.
Right. That really influenced and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Dylan. Yeah, I mean, since you were born in 42, I mean, you weren't really a hippie or anything like that. You were a little that are already. I mean, you you kind of then
I mean, my interest was like Garcia, still in that generation of beat writers.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, the hippies were something of a betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah, what was going on there? Well, like hippies picked up on some ideas, but it was maybe only good for a couple of years. the hippies didn't really stop the war.
No, no, they needed the debates, but I mean, the question was, what were you going to plunge down the drug rabbit hole?
Yeah, but
And
I
not
think I think
much.
I think they did that because they failed in a lot of other ways, and
Yeah,
and
I mean, if you look at these, um, I mean, I consider Burroughs a social revolutionary. So much of his reputation is racist, misogynist, and the like. But I treat him always as a social reformer. And as a social reformer, he pretty much failed as well, you know. And so almost all of the spirit of these 60s people, and particularly in our own contemporary culture, where we've gone full-blown 19th century, if not 18th century, in cultural values. But there's a lot of failure around all of these people. Ginsberg, Kerouac, and the like. The one who's come through with the most staying power, I think, is Burroughs, because he is being accepted now in the kind of serious intellectual community. And I think that's why Burroughs Unbound, the title I take to mean that Burroughs is less interesting as a writer of particular kinds of books than a cultural spirit and innovator, and his performances are at least as important as his published books.
Burroughs had no interest in playing to the mainstream. I mean, like Ginsberg.
Oh, he did. He did, especially at the beginning. He wanted to write.
Oh well, yeah, but I think that was a lot of people were writing like pulp novels. I think that.
Yeah.
I think I don't think that is that the mainstream. I think
no, not the mainstream for Burroughs.
I think the mainstream at that time was like Norman Mailer and James Jones and those people.
Yeah.
And I think I'm talking about I think Ginsberg and Kerouac. I mean they had some kind of idea to impact the center, and I think Burroughs kind of stayed on the outside and just kind of did his own trip, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think you have to remember that the Beat generation is a post-war generation, but it pretty much falls apart in 1962 when most of them go off to India. Then they become something different, and Ginsberg becomes something different at that point as well. Although he comes back and he joins Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder tour in the mid-70s.
Yeah, but he was with them before that,
Yeah.
He was kind of hanging out at yeah, I mean, I think he was like any association with Bob Dylan or the hippies, like, but I don't think Kerouac ever like accepted the hippies. He just thought that they were good kids or something.
Yeah. And I mean, Kerouac had his own personal problems.
Yeah, but when you said that it kind of, and when they went to India in '62, was that a good change, or what do you think? What do you think?
Well, whether or not it's good or bad for me depends on the level of work that was produced.
Okay.
I think the core work is from 1955 with the presentation of Howell in San Francisco through '62 when they go off to India, and he's got different spiritual interests.
Yeah, I think some of the Ginsberg books of the '60s and '70s weren't. I don't think he really got good again till the '80s when he did Cosmopolitan Greeting, one of the later ones, and some of that stuff, and like that after Howl and Kaddish, I think he kind of lost his way there for a bit.
Well, he used up an awful lot of material that had been percolating for years. And I think, this is the issue why there are so many one novel writers. Sometimes things percolate for years and years and years and years, and it all comes out like The Invisible Man or something. And you get very little beyond that. Although Juneteenth now, today is Juneteenth, so we
Well,
shouldn't say that his second novel is insignificant.
oh, who's that?
Ralph Ellison,
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
the Invisible Man
yep,
uses up an awful lot of material, and
yeah.
and Howell uses up an awful lot of material.
It's also Bloomsday, so I got my copy
Yeah,
of Ulysses here.
yeah. That's the modern language, modern library edition.
Yeah, and so I have that. I've been reading it for like almost 40 years here,
Yeah,
and yeah, so so there's, like if people read Kerouac, I mean, they're not going to read like all 12 novels or 15 novels. They're going to read On the Road, maybe Big Sur, maybe Subterraneans or something. They're not.
yeah. Dharma bums.
Dharma bums. There's only going to be, and there's not, like, Joyce. You have the 4 books, and they're all good. They're all worth checking out, and
They're all monumental.
yeah, some writers, they write 1 book or maybe 3 books that are really good, and some of the later stuff or some of the early stuff is weak and stuff.
Yeah.
Beckett is pretty good all the way through. I like Watt, I like Murphy, I like the early stuff, I like the middle, I like the later stuff, I like Beckett's poetry doesn't really get like a lot of play, but I think it was a big influence on me because trying to write in English and French myself,
Yeah.
I was really into the early Beckett poetry.
Yeah, it's worth going back to.
Yeah, and yeah, we've been going about an hour. So like, just remind everybody again that you want to. Where's that thing? Yeah, you want to go to the either Amazon or the English department at Florida State University. Check out some of these books. It's all interesting stuff. Gontarski's doing so much great work here. He's like one. All these guys that we're interviewing and stuff. A lot. If you take me and Gontarski together, I interviewed Allen Ginsberg and Martin Amis, and a lot of these guys are gone, and we're like the only living person that knows like a lot of these people.
That's right. That's an important connection.
And from this book, you interviewed Ferlinghetti and McClure and
Don Allen. Don't overlook Don Allen. The Don Allen interview is really very good.
Don Allen's still, I think he's still with us, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Don Allen and John Ritchie's still with us, but most of these people are gone. A lot of the people, Ian Esco, that we talked about in this interview, we're between the two of us. Because we led these kind of parallel existences through Grove, and
we've had interconnections. We've had interconnections with a lot.
And we both lived in New York, and we both lived in LA, and we both lived.
Right.
Did you live in San Francisco or?
Only while working at the Magic Theater.
But Gontarski seems he grew up in Greenpoint, but he hasn't been back in like 50 years for some reason. I don't know. Lorimer Street, go check it out. Buy all. I gotta recommend these books. Gontarski's like one of the, if not the guy on Beckett, and Burroughs, it's like he's like definitely in the top 3. It's like, who else are you gonna read about Beckett? So people, if you're gonna, yeah, we got the thing there. Okay, so thanks again for talking to me. We'll put this up on YouTube and for everybody to see, and
thank you.
Read some of these books, because these are important writers we're talking about here. I have to emphasize this, and And it's great knowing you, and you know,
Likewise,
keep up the good work.
I'm delighted we've been kept in touch for so many years.
Yeah, I learn something all the time, and it's great. It's great to go back. Okay. So that's all for today, kids. And you know, maybe we'll do a third one or a fourth interview, and we'll talk then. Okay.
Always happy to talk to you, Alex.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Let's see.